My name is Chloe, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 6 years, my family has been treating me like their personal ATM. The moment everything finally shattered for me wasn't during some huge blowout or dramatic scene. It happened on an ordinary Sunday afternoon in my parents' kitchen, while my mother was laughing and casually referring to me as a cash cow. I was standing near the counter, scrolling through work emails on my phone, when I overheard her voice drifting in from the dining room. A chorus of laughter erupted from the other room. Then someone else chimed in. Quote 1. They were fully aware I could hear every word. Nobody bothered lowering their voices. Nobody paused or hesitated. Nobody seemed to feel even the slightest bit of shame about what they were saying. I didn't storm into the room to confront them. I didn't clear my throat or try to laugh it off the way I usually would. Instead, I just stood there, phone gripped in my hand, listening to them casually strip me down to nothing more than a bank account with legs, while they plotted yet another family vacation that I was apparently expected to fund. My chest felt tight, but my face stayed completely neutral. I finished the last sip of my coffee, placed the empty mug in the sink, and walked right past them wearing a calm smile, acting like I hadn't heard a single word. They kept chattering away about flights and beach resorts like it was already a done deal, because in their minds, it was. I didn't argue with them. I didn't say a single word. But right then and there, something inside me clicked into place like a locked door finally shutting. If you want to see how one simple word, no, turned their dream vacation into an absolute nightmare they never saw coming, stick with me until the very end of this story and don't skip a single second. They hadn't always called me a cash cow, you know. In the beginning, it sounded softer, almost complimentary. You're our responsible one, they'd say. Quote 4. It all started with small things. Picking up the dinner bill, covering a phone bill, quote 5. Paying for a weekend getaway because, quote 6. Back then, I convinced myself it was perfectly normal. I was the first person in our small town to get out, land a solid job in Seattle, and earn more money than my parents had ever made. I genuinely thought helping them out was what a good daughter did. It felt like love, not an obligation. Then came the first major vacation. They wanted to go to Hawaii. Money was tight for them, as it always seemed to be. My mom called me, her voice all sweet and gentle, telling me how this trip would bring us closer together and create memories we'd treasure forever. She didn't have to actually say the words out loud. I volunteered the money myself. I bought 4 tickets, paid for the hotel, and watched their faces absolutely light up when I clicked the purchase button. Quote 7. My mom whispered as she hugged me tight. My chest felt warm. I genuinely believed her in that moment. But after Hawaii came Mexico, then Florida, then another beach trip somewhere else. Every single time the script was identical. Somebody would mention a destination, sigh dramatically about how expensive it was, and then turn their eyes toward me. I could feel their gaze on my face, just waiting for me to say the familiar words. As time went on, their gratitude started to fade. Their expectations grew bigger and bolder. The thank you messages gradually morphed into casual texts like, quote 9 or quote 10. Their voices shifted from pleading to entitled, as if my automatic quote 11 was now just a given, something they could count on without question. The real gut punch came one evening when I was scrolling through social media. My cousin had posted a story from a barbecue at my parents' house. In the background audio, I could clearly hear my mother bragging to someone. "We take trips every year now," she said proudly. "Chloe pays for all of them. She's basically our little bank, our cash cow." Everyone laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Someone in the background said, quote 14. I replayed that video clip so many times I could recite every single word from memory. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't an accident. It was a narrative. a role they had assigned to me without ever asking for my consent. Meanwhile, my own life wasn't nearly as glamorous as they apparently imagined. Yes, I worked in tech. Yes, I made more money than they did. But they never saw the late nights at the office, the constant burnout, the relentless pressure to perform well. They didn't see the student loans I was still chipping away at, or the emergency savings fund I was desperately trying to build. Every single trip I funded for them was a trip I couldn't take for myself. Every small favor meant pushing my own personal goals a little further down the road. When my mom called me a cash cow in that kitchen, it wasn't the first time she had used those words. It was simply the first time I truly believed that she meant it. Not as a joke, not as a little slip-up, but as a cold, hard fact. That night, I opened my banking app and started scrolling back through 5 years' worth of charges. Airlines, hotels, rental cars, restaurants, thousands and thousands of dollars. My name appeared on every single receipt. Their names appeared on every boarding pass. My throat tightened as I calculated the total in my head. This wasn't love. This was a pattern. This was a system. The next morning, a new message popped up in the family group chat. "So, about the next vacation," my mom wrote. "We were thinking about going somewhere nicer this year. We really deserve it after everything we've been through. Chloe, you can handle it, right?" There was a winking emoji at the end of her message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in years, I didn't type, quote, 17, I didn't type, sure. I didn't send a nervous little joke to lighten the mood. Instead, I deleted all my drafts and locked my phone. They assumed my silence meant surrender, that I would cave at the last minute like I always did. What they didn't know was that my silence was actually the beginning of something entirely different. Have you ever realized that the people you love aren't just leaning on you for support? They're actually standing on top of you. And they have absolutely no intention of climbing down. Who do you become when you finally stop letting them use you as a stepping stool? A few days later, my brother texted me directly. "We need to talk about the trip. Call me." No please. No question mark. Just a straightforward order like I was some kind of travel agency. I decided to call him back. He picked up on the first ring. I could hear the television playing in the background and the casual confidence in his tone. "So, Mom says we found a really good deal to the Bahamas," he began. "If we book this week, we can lock in the price." He paused for dramatic effect. "We just need your card to make it official." There it was again. The assumption. Not a polite request, not a question, but a demand dressed up as a casual conversation. "I'm not giving you my card," I said calmly. The line went completely quiet for a second. Then he laughed like I had just told some joke that didn't quite land right. He said. He had said those exact words so many times, they sounded like a pre-recorded message playing on repeat. Quote 27. I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even. Quote 28. He made an annoyed sound. Quote 29. The answer sat fully formed on the tip of my tongue, but I swallowed it back down. Instead I said, quote 30. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Quote 31. He asked, his voice getting sharper now. Quote 32. I answered firmly. That night I called for a family meeting. No food to soften the mood, no cozy atmosphere, no distractions. I wanted this conversation to cut straight through all the noise. They arrived looking suspicious and tense, like they already sensed they weren't going to like whatever I was about to say. We sat down in the living room. Nobody reached for the remote control. The air felt heavier than usual, thick with anticipation. I'm not funding this vacation, I began. My voice didn't shake. I had rehearsed every word in my head all day long. Quote 34. My mom's face hardened instantly. What is this really about, Chloe? We thought you enjoyed helping. You never complained before. That doesn't mean I wasn't hurting inside, I said quietly. You called me a cash cow. Do you remember that? Silence filled the room. Then she scoffed dismissively. Oh, that? You know we were just joking around. Were you? I asked. I heard you telling other people that I'm your bank, your little gold mine, your way to finally travel. I looked from one face to another. Do you have any idea how that feels to hear? My brother crossed his arms defensively. So what? Now you're playing the victim? We've struggled our whole lives. You're doing well financially. Why shouldn't you give back a little? A little? I almost laughed at the absurdity. Do you have any idea how much money I've actually spent on all of you? He rolled his eyes dramatically. Oh, here we go with the guilt trip. In that exact moment, something clicked for me. They weren't just unaware of what they'd been doing. They were comfortable with it. Comfortable with me sacrificing my own needs and goals. Comfortable with me being the default provider for everything. Comfortable with the entire idea that my life existed solely to make theirs easier and more enjoyable. I'm not your sponsor, I said quietly but firmly. I'm not your personal bank, and I am definitely not a cash cow. From now on, if you want to travel anywhere, you pay for it yourselves. The outburst came immediately and explosively. Accusations flew, insults were hurled. My mom said I had changed, that I wasn't the daughter she raised. My brother said the money had gone to my head. Someone else said I had forgotten where I came from. They painted me as the selfish one, the ungrateful one, the villain in their story. I let them talk. I didn't yell back or try to defend myself. I just sat there and listened to every twisted attempt they made to make me feel guilty for setting a boundary. And while they ranted and raved, I realized something incredibly important. If I kept fighting like this, going back and forth in circles, I would eventually lose. Not the argument itself, but my peace of mind. They would drag me around in circles until I was so exhausted that I'd surrender just to make it stop. That had always been the pattern between us, so I decided to stop playing their game. I stood up, and with a steady, measured voice, I said, quote, 47, quote, 48, my mom demanded. Quote, 49. I answered, grabbing my bag from the chair. Quote, 50. I met her eyes directly. Quote, 51. I walked out of that house feeling calmer than I had felt in years. They assumed it was just another empty threat, another dramatic moment that would dissolve the second I sent my card details at the last minute, like I always had before. They had absolutely no idea the game had just fundamentally changed. Tell me something. If your own family branded you as their personal cash cow, would you keep feeding them indefinitely? Or would you finally let them feel what it's like when the cow stops showing up at the gate? After that tense meeting, the calls started flooding in. Missed calls, voicemails, half-hearted apologies mixed with continued pressure. We didn't mean it like that. You know how we joke around. Don't make such a big deal out of this. Each message ended the exact same way. So, what about the trip? I stopped answering immediately. Instead, I watched from a distance. I watched how they behaved when they thought I was just being moody and would eventually come around like I always did. They went ahead and started planning the vacation anyway. Bahamas, all-inclusive resort, upgraded rooms, fancy excursions. They even created a brand new group chat and titled it Family Paradise. Then they added me to it without even asking permission. The very first message made my jaw physically clench. Chloe will cover the flights. We can use our money for fun stuff once we're there. My mom wrote it casually, like a simple statement of fact. No question mark, no maybe, just an assumption. I started taking screenshots. Every single entitled message, every assumption, every casual reference to my bank account as if it existed purely for their comfort and entertainment. Then I went back through old messages, old social media posts, old video stories, the bragging to friends, the jokes made at my expense, The way they told other people about all their amazing trips, without ever once mentioning that I had personally paid for every single one. I didn't gather all those receipts out of petty revenge. I gathered them to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic. I needed solid proof for myself, and maybe, eventually, for them too. At work one day, my colleagues were chatting about their own summer plans. One friend casually asked, quote, 57. The way she phrased it stung a little, because that's exactly what it looked like from the outside looking in. Not generosity, not kindness, sponsorship. Not this time, I replied with a small smile. This time, I'm doing something completely different. That night, sitting at my desk with my laptop open in front of me, I made two very distinct decisions. One decision was for them. One decision was for me. For them, I opened a travel booking website and searched the exact dates they had been discussing in the group chat. Bahamas, same resort they wanted, same upgraded rooms. I clicked through all the options very carefully. The system gave me multiple payment choices. Pay now, pay later, reserve and pay at the property, fully refundable until check-in. I chose the option that would expose exactly how much they had come to rely on me. I made a reservation in their names. I entered my own email address, so all the confirmations would come directly to me. At the payment section, I carefully selected Pay at Property, Card required at check-in, no charge in advance. To my family, the screenshots I would send them would look exactly like any other fully paid trip to the resort. It would look like I had taken care of everything, just like always. But the truth was, there was no money attached to it yet. I forwarded them a clean screenshot of the confirmation number with a simple, brief message. Here, booked. That was it. No happy emojis, no exclamation marks, just exactly what they wanted to see. Proof that I had apparently taken care of everything. Within seconds, the group chat absolutely exploded with excitement. Knew you'd come through. You scared us for a second there. Our cash cow still loves us. Someone dropped a whole string of laughing emojis. I stared at that last line for a very long time. Our cash cow still loves us? They were right about one thing, I suppose. I did still love them, but not in the way they imagined. Not in that blind, self-sacrificing way that had kept me stuck in this pattern for so many years. Love without healthy boundaries isn't really love at all. It's just self-destruction dressed up as loyalty. For me, I made another booking entirely. Different dates, different location entirely. A quiet, solo trip to a small coastal town I had always wanted to visit but never could. Because my money was always tied up in their plans and their dreams. I paid for my trip in full with my own card. No one else knew about it. No screenshots shared in any group chat. No announcements. Just me and a confirmation number sitting in my inbox. In the weeks that followed, I played my assigned role perfectly. When my mom called to talk excitedly about outfits and planned excursions, I listened politely. When my brother bragged to friends on speakerphone about our annual family trip, I said absolutely nothing. They assumed my silence meant compliance, cooperation, business as usual. During one phone call, my mom said, half joking, "You know, if anything goes wrong with the bookings, I'm totally blaming you. You're the tech person after all." "Then I guess you'd better hope everything goes exactly as you expect," I replied evenly. She laughed, completely missing the sharp edge hidden underneath my calm tone. As the departure date approached closer and closer, the energy in the group chat climbed higher. They sent packing lists, countdown messages, beach photos pulled from Pinterest to get them excited. I watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for not sharing their excitement. I felt something else entirely, anticipation. Not because I wanted to see them suffer or fail, but because I wanted them to finally see reality with clear eyes. To realize that the trips they had been taking for granted all these years weren't magic. It was me. It had always been me, sacrificing behind the scenes. Have you ever been so used to carrying everyone on your shoulders that you almost forget they have perfectly functioning legs of their own? What happens when you finally step aside and let them feel the full weight they kept dumping on your back? 2 days before the scheduled trip, my mom called. This time, there was a strange urgency in her voice that I hadn't heard before. I had rehearsed this exact moment in my mind dozens of times. I knew exactly what I was going to say. Still, my fingers tightened around the phone. I said simply, "Silence." Complete, stunned silence. Then, quote, 71, quote, 72, I corrected her calmly. Quote 73, quote 74. She said my name like a warning. Quote 75, quote 76, I replied. Quote 77. The explosion came fast and furious. Ichat, quote, hash 78. Quote 79. The phrase almost made me laugh out loud. I quote 80 iosao. She hung up on me abruptly. The family group chat immediately lit up like fireworks. Accusations, threats, manipulations, emotional pleas. I didn't respond to any of it. I muted the entire chat and went right back to packing my own suitcase for my quiet solo trip. My flight would take off one day after theirs, heading to a peaceful place none of them had ever bothered to ask me about, because my personal desires had never been a priority in their world. The morning of their departure, my phone buzzed non-stop with calls and messages. I let every single one of them ring through to voicemail. I pictured them in my mind, rushing frantically through the airport, arms loaded down with bags, still convinced that no matter how dramatic things had sounded on the phone, I had still secretly paid for everything because I always did. Because that was the story they believed about me, the story they needed to be true. I did check my email out of curiosity, though. A notification popped up from the airline confirming their check-in. No payment issue there. They had apparently bought those tickets themselves after I went quiet, probably expecting to splurge on extras at the resort while my magic card handled all the big expensive stuff. Then, a few hours later, another email arrived. This time, it was from the hotel. Guest pre-arrival confirmation, pay at property. Card required upon check-in. I could almost see the scene unfolding in my mind. Them arriving at the resort, sun bright in their eyes, already in full vacation mode, walking up confidently to the front desk with that entitled energy they always carried. I wasn't physically there to watch it happen, but I got to experience it anyway through my phone blowing up with messages. First came a text from my brother. Quote, 85. Then another. Quote, 86. I waited patiently, let the panic build and spread. Another message came through. Quote A7. Finally, my mom called. I picked up this time. In the background, I could hear the quiet murmur of other hotel guests, the low hum of lobby music, and the sharp edge of embarrassment creeping into her voice. Quote, 88. She hissed into the phone. Quote, 89. Quote, 90. I said calmly. There was a beat of stunned silence. Quote, 91. Quote, 92. I repeated. Quote, 93. Her voice cracked somewhere between anger and pure panic. Quote, 94. I closed my eyes for just a second. I could picture the scene so clearly. The front desk agent waiting politely with a professional smile. Other families checking in smoothly with their own credit cards. My family realizing, maybe for the very first time, that the world wasn't built on my endless, automatic yes. You didn't care about humiliating me when you called me a cash cow, I said quietly. You didn't care when you joked about me being your personal bank in front of other people. You didn't care when you just assumed your trips mattered more than my own future and financial security. So no, I'm not fixing this. You can pay, or you can go home. Those are your only two options. You're heartless, she spat out. After everything we sacrificed for you over the years, this is how you repay us? I've been repaying you for years, I answered steadily. With interest. This isn't revenge. This is balance. This is reality finally catching up. For a long moment, there was only the sound of her breathing hard into the phone. Then I heard my brother's voice in the background, low and angry, arguing with the front desk agent. I caught fragments of the conversation. Quote 102. The agent's calm, professional replies drifted through. We can't check you in without payment, sir. Chloe, my mom said finally, her voice smaller now, almost pleading. Please. The single word hung in the air between us like a weight. Not a demand this time, an actual plea. It almost pierced through the armor I had carefully built up. Almost. If I pay today, I said slowly and deliberately, this cycle never ends. You know that. I know that. You'll go home from this trip and immediately start planning the next one, still expecting me to cover it. You'll keep calling me the cash cow behind my back. You'll keep telling people I exist just to pay for your fun. I took a deep breath. I'm done with that. If you want this vacation badly enough, you'll find a way to pay for it yourselves. If you can't manage it, then you'll go home. Either way, you'll walk out of that hotel lobby knowing exactly how much you've been taking from me all these years. Maybe being forced to feel that pressure and panic for once will teach you something my begging never could. I let the silence stretch out between us. Then I added one final thing. And by the way, if you ever try to tell people I abandoned you or make me the villain in this story, I have all the screenshots saved. Every joke, every brag, every single time you called me your bank. I will not let you rewrite this story to make yourselves look innocent. Her answer came out as barely a whisper. All we were doing was counting on you. Exactly, I said. And that right there is the entire problem. I hung up the phone. Then I switched it to airplane mode. Not because I was boarding a flight just yet, but because I was completely done being available every single time they wanted to lean on me for support they should have been giving themselves. As I zipped up my suitcase for my own quiet, peaceful trip, a strange calm settled deep into my chest. They were finally standing face to face with the reality they had refused to see for years. No magic solution, no loopholes, no last-minute rescue swooping in to save them. Just the simple, honest truth. Without the cash cow, the pasture looks very, very different. If you were in my exact position, would you have stepped in at the last second to save them from embarrassment? Or would you have let them feel the full weight of what they had built on your back for all those years? I didn't know exactly what choice they made in that hotel lobby. Pay up or leave. Swipe a card or walk away empty-handed. All I knew for certain was that, for the first time in years, the outcome didn't depend on me swooping in to fix everything. I spent the rest of that day in my apartment, calmly packing for my own trip. Comfortable clothes, a couple of good books, my laptop. Nothing flashy or showy. My vacation wasn't about posting perfect photos or impressing anyone. It was about completely disappearing from the role they had written for me without my permission. That night, I finally took my phone off airplane mode. It lit up with notifications like a slot machine jackpot. Missed calls, angry voicemails, dozens and dozens of messages in the family group chat. I scrolled through slowly, reading each one. At first, it was pure panic. Then the tone shifted to anger. Then the messages got shorter and colder. Quote, 115. So they had paid after all. They had somehow found the money. Maxed out a credit card maybe. Borrowed from someone else. Scraped together funds they had always claimed they never had. Buried deep in the chat thread, there was one single line from my mom that made my scrolling finger stop completely. Quote, 116. There it was, laid out plainly. All they could do was pray and hope. For years and years, they had treated my automatic quote 117 like a guarantee, like a law of nature that could never change. Now, faced with a bill they thought I had already quietly absorbed, they had finally felt the same panic I had been living with in silence for so long. I put the phone down gently and let that realization sink all the way in. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel triumphant or victorious. I felt level, balanced, like a scale had finally tipped out of the extreme angle it had been stuck in for years. The next morning, I boarded my own flight to my quiet coastal destination. No one in my family knew where I was going. I sat by the window, watching the city slowly shrink beneath the clouds, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time: lightness, freedom. Not because all my problems had magically vanished, but because I was no longer volunteering to carry everyone else's weight on my shoulders. In the small coastal town I had chosen, life moved slower and quieter. I walked along the water's edge, ate peaceful meals alone without rushing through them, and slept soundly at night without my phone tucked under my pillow, waiting for the next crisis text to come through. On the second night of my trip, I opened my laptop and wrote out the entire story from start to finish. Not with real names, not with identifying details that could trace back to anyone, but with every ugly piece of truth laid bare. I posted it anonymously on a forum where people discuss family dynamics and setting healthy boundaries. I expected maybe a few comments, perhaps some mixed opinions from strangers. Instead, the responses poured in like a flood. "You're not cruel for doing this. You're setting boundaries that should have existed years ago. They called you a cash cow? That's dehumanizing. That's financial abuse. This isn't about a vacation. This is about years of them exploiting you. Don't go back to the old pattern when they cool off and apologize. They will test your no over and over again." I read every single comment, some with tears streaming down my face, some with a strange sense of validation washing over me. For the first time, complete strangers, not just my one close friend, were saying out loud what I had been too afraid to name myself. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a communication issue, it was exploitation, plain and simple. I forwarded the anonymous post to Lauren, my best friend, with a simple message attached. Quote 122. She called me almost immediately. Quote 123. She said, her voice tight with concern. Quote 124. Quote 125. I corrected her gently. Quote Marsh 126. She told me about her own cousin who had done something similar years ago. Stopped funding a parent who'd been treating her like a personal bank. Quote 127. Lauren explained. Quote 128. We talked for over an hour that night. When we finally hung up, I didn't feel like a villain anymore. I felt like someone finally walking out of a trap they had been pretending was a gift. On the very last night of my peaceful solo trip, I received a message from an unknown number. It was my cousin texting me. "Hey, I heard what happened at the hotel check-in. They're telling everyone in the family that you humiliated them on purpose. But we all know they've been bragging for years about you paying for absolutely everything. If you ever need someone to back you up and tell the truth, I will." So the story was spreading through the family grapevine. Of course it was. My immediate family hated being embarrassed even more than they hated being proven wrong. I had given them both at the same time. For a brief moment I wondered what they were saying in living rooms and private group messages I was no longer part of. Was I the ungrateful daughter now in everyone's eyes? The traitor? The cold-hearted tech girl who forgot where she came from? Then another thought hit me clearly. Let them talk. Let them twist the story however they need to in order to protect their pride and save face. I had something much stronger than their version of events. I had reality, screenshots, bank statements, years of memories, and most importantly, I had a brand new rule for my life. I would never, ever again pay for my own mistreatment. When I finally returned home, my apartment was exactly as I had left it, quiet and still. My suitcase thumped softly against the floor as I set it down in the hallway. My phone buzzed one single time with a calendar reminder I had forgotten to turn off. No new messages from my family. The silence felt loud at first, but not empty. More like a pause between chapters of a book. What do you do when the people who raised you refuse to see you as anything but a resource to be used? Do you spend your entire life trying desperately to convince them otherwise? Or do you start living as if their opinion isn't the final verdict on who you truly are? They came back home from the vacation about a week later. I only knew because my cousin texted me again. They're home now, and they are really, really mad. For 3 more days after that, nothing happened. No calls, no messages, no unexpected knocks on my apartment door. I went to work, came home, cooked simple meals, and slept soundly. The quiet became almost comfortable, like a warm blanket. Then, on a Thursday evening, someone buzzed my apartment intercom. "It's Mom," the speaker crackled. I stared at the panel for a few seconds. In the past, I would have opened the door immediately without thinking twice. This time, I asked carefully, "Are you alone?" "No," she admitted. "Your brother is with me. We need to talk." Old reflexes flared up inside me. Guilt, anxiety, the urge to fix everything. But those feelings didn't overrule my decision this time. I said slowly and clearly. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said quietly, quote, 137, quote, I buzzed them in. They walked into my apartment with none of the careless, casual energy they usually carried. No jokes, no offhand comments about how fancy my building was, no subtle digs about my lifestyle. My mom looked genuinely tired. My brother looked angry and embarrassed, which for him was almost the exact same facial expression. We sat at the small table in my kitchen. No coffee offered, no snacks, just 3 people and a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Quote, 138. My mom began carefully. Quote, 139. Quote, 140. I said quietly. Quote, 141. She flinched slightly at my words. Quote, 142. Quote, 143. I replied calmly. Quote, 144. My brother leaned forward with his elbows on the table. Quote, 45. Quote, 146. I said evenly. Quote, 147. He opened his mouth to argue, then slowly closed it again. My mom rubbed her temples like she had a headache. She said softly, her voice almost breaking. I said, quote, 51. She nodded slowly, staring down at her hands. Quote, 152. Quote, 153. I answered honestly. Quote, 154. My brother muttered defensively. Quote, 155. Quote, 156. I said carefully. Quote, 157. I pulled out a folder I had carefully prepared days earlier. Printed bank statements with highlighted charges, screenshots stapled to timelines showing years of patterns. I slid it across the table toward them. Quote, 158, quote. I said quietly. Quote, 159, quote. My brother glanced down first. His jaw shifted noticeably. My mom's eyes moved slowly over the pages, scanning the numbers. I watched her face carefully as the full amount registered in her mind. We had no idea it added up to this much, she whispered. You didn't want to know, I replied. You wanted the trips, the photos, the feeling of being taken care of. Actually knowing the cost might have ruined the illusion for you. We sat in thick silence for a long moment. Then my mom asked quietly, So what happens now? Are you just completely done with us? Are we supposed to never travel again? I can't control what you do with your lives, I said firmly. If you want to travel, then save money for it. Plan for it carefully. Use your own cards, your own funds. Ask each other for help if you want to, but I'm out. No more funding vacations. No more emergency bailouts because you spent what you had on fun stuff and expected me to cover all the boring realities. She swallowed hard. What about real emergencies, though? Medical bills, rent, serious things. I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part, the line I needed to draw very clearly. If there's a genuine emergency, I said slowly, health crisis, housing emergency, something truly life-threatening, I will think about it. I'm not promising anything specific, but I will consider helping once, with very clear limits set in advance. But vacations, upgrades, shopping trips, debt from overspending that you conveniently call bad luck, that's not my responsibility. Not anymore. My brother shook his head. You sound like a banker explaining loan terms to customers. That's exactly what you turned me into, I said. So I'm retiring from that position. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Quote, 1 to 72. Quote, Son 73. I answered honestly. Quote, 174. She reached across the table toward me but stopped halfway, her hand hovering in the air. Quote, 175. I thought about all the supportive comments on my anonymous post, all the times over the years I had almost caved and given in, all the nights I had stared at my bank account balance, wondering why I felt so guilty for wanting to keep my own hard-earned money. I said honestly. My brother said flatly. Quote, 179. I replied firmly. Quote, 180. We talked in circles for a while after that, going over the same points from different angles, but something fundamental had shifted between us. They didn't shout as much. They didn't throw around the phrase, quote, 181, quote, again, not even once. At one point, my mom whispered, quote, 182, I shrugged, quote, 183. My mom almost smiled at that response, a small, tired curve of her mouth. Quote 184. Quote 185. I said quietly. Quote 186. When they finally stood up to leave, my mom hesitated at the door, her hand on the doorknob. Quote 187. She said softly. Quote 188. Quote 189. I answered sincerely. Quote 190. After the door closed behind them, the apartment fell quiet again. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy or oppressive. It was spacious. There was finally room for me in my own life. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the anonymous post I had written during my trip. I added a new update to the thread. They went on the vacation. They had to pay at check-in. They panicked. They prayed for a miracle that didn't come. And they realized, maybe for the first time, that nothing had ever actually been free. We talked after they got back. They saw the numbers laid out clearly. They saw me, really saw me, maybe for the first time in years. I didn't rescue them. I didn't cave under pressure. I set firm rules and stuck to them no matter how hard they pushed. I don't know yet what our relationship will look like in a year from now. But for the first time, I'm not afraid of that question anymore. Whatever happens next, it won't be built on me being their cash cow. It will be built on something real, or it won't be built at all. I hit the post button and sat back in my chair. A notification popped up almost immediately. Someone had already replied to my update. This isn't you being cruel. This is you finally turning off the tap they drilled into your soul without ever asking permission. They'll either learn to stand on their own or they'll drown in their own choices. Either way, you're free now. Free. The word settled into me like a warm, steady weight in my chest. Not dramatic, not explosive, just solid and real. People like to say that revenge is all about making others suffer for what they did to you. But sometimes, the most powerful form of revenge is simply refusing to keep suffering for people who think your pain is just part of the deal, part of your role in their lives. So if you ever find yourself being treated like a walking wallet, a permanent solution to someone else's problems, a cash cow dressed up as a good child, remember this story. You are allowed to step away from the pasture. You are allowed to say no, firmly and finally. And when they finally realize that their prayers for another bailout won't be answered, that's not cruelty. That's just the first honest chapter you've written in your own story.